Ibrahim, welcome to part two of our conversation.
Thank you.
Now, let's just go back a bit and say that during COVID, online sales jumped dramatically, as we know, and the expectation was that online purchasing was providing, at that time, an existential threat to offline retail. Whilst there were some major collapses by some famous names, which we all know, the post-COVID scenario is very, very different. Although retail is on a slow upward curve again, the market has changed, as you've already identified, beyond all measure. The key issue is that retailers remain too slow to adapt, as you've said. Necessary transformation is still too slow, either because of internal intransigence or lack of management support or, dare I say, interest. What needs to be done now, in your view? Again, just please focus on the travel retail community.
Let's start with the acknowledgement that an airport has the potential to be the most powerful media platform for a brand. And when I say a media platform, I mean a platform for which a brand doesn't necessarily have to transact. It's a platform for recruiting customers. At the end of the day, retail has always been and will always be about four things. Whether it's an airport or anywhere else, it still applies. Recruitment, transaction, fulfillment, and retention.
But has the priority amongst those changed?
Absolutely. So, what's interesting is that transaction and fulfillment is migrating away from the physical space. And I deliberately call it the physical space, not store. So if that is the case, then what we're left with is recruitment and retention. If a brand in a physical space, its priority is to recruit and retain customers, it is therefore behaving like a media brand and therefore needs to determine its value, determine its purpose through that lens. Now, I'm being deliberately provocative. Of course, there's always going to be exceptions. There's always going to be, in an airport, in a shopping centre, places where you transact and fulfill. You buy something, you take it away, or you click and collect. Of course there is. That's not the debate. The debate is, in any given asset, the GLA, 100% of the GLA, how much of that is going to become non-retail or non-transactional retail? And we're seeing in the projects we're working in, from urban regeneration to shopping centres to many, many different types of asset, about a 40% reduction in transactional retail. Now, so therefore, there's 60% retail, okay, and 40% non-retail. That could be co-working, it could be health and wellness, it could be elements of learning, culture. That all applies to airports. And I'm going to come back to that in a second, particularly the co-working piece. If we take the other 60%, I don't believe that is going to be exclusively transactional. We believe that that 60% will fragment into three typologies of space, and therefore three types of experience, three types of service proposition, three types of, and this is the critical one, revenue model. And we believe that the three types are as follows, which is in the book. The first is traditional transaction and fulfillment. You buy something, you take it away, you click and collect, and the rent model in an airport scenario is MAG plus turnover rent. The second typology is what we call community. It's where a brand takes a space and brings its community there, or people who are interested in that community, a community of interest, whether it's whiskey, whether it's yoga, whether it's cooking. And in that space, people come along and they partake in an experience. So there's no turnover, nothing's being sold as such. Maybe some instances there would be some things sold, but by and large the purpose is not about selling product. It's about buying into what the brand believes, buying into the ethos of the brand, buying into what it represents and the experiences it puts on. So how would you suggest that, you know, we have a revenue model from that? Yes, they can pay for the space. Maybe the rent model is based on the footfall, how many people go into this. Maybe it's based on the dwell, how long they spend in this space. Maybe it's based on the engagement, the sentiment, what they think. You know, maybe it's engaged.
It's a whole different bunch of criteria.
A whole different bunch of criteria, different bunch of data. Maybe it's a subscription model. If I'm a frequent traveller and I am, you know, I'm part of that brand. Maybe I subscribe to The Economist and I go to the airport and there's an amazing experience about, I don't know, current affairs and technology and learning, and I'm a subscriber. I get entrance into that. The data from that, I'm going to come back to that. The data from that is
rich
valuable.
theme.
Yeah. And the third typology of this 60%, we call recruitment. That's when a brand takes a space, and this space, and by and large, I'm not talking about concrete boxes with glass fronts. This space can be, a recruitment space can be like a stage set. And it's there to recruit customers, to drive them onto online platforms, onto social platforms. And I could imagine this amazing stage for a brand.
Transactional or not transactional?
Non-transactional. It's about a crazy, amazing experience that a brand puts on that is live streamed. So I've got 50 people watching it in the airport and 50,000 people watching it somewhere else online, virtually. It's live streamed. It's ephemeral. It's here today, gone tomorrow. It's about the latest and the greatest thing the brand is telling the world. And these people that turn up are there for 40 minutes, an hour, whatever. They're tweeting, they're following, they're photographing. They are creating what we call media impressions. So the purpose of this experience of the brand is to drive media impressions. And the media impressions are not only by the people in the airport, it's all the people that are being live streamed outside. So the airport suddenly is not place dependent. It's in the virtual world.
It is cannibalizing some of the airport revenue base.
Well, this is the point. This is the point. And the point I was going to make about the data. So what is the value of that brand? And there's a great example I use in the book and in my presentations. The Converse brand, the sneaker brand. The sneaker brand Converse, and I'm going to try to remember the numbers. I've presented it enough times, I should remember them. Took a space, not in the airport, in the domestic market, for 4 days. And it had a whole, I mean, it's a big space of 5-6 stories, big kind of building. And it had a whole plethora of events, music, influencers, graffiti artists, culture, a whole bunch of things. Most of which had nothing to do with sneakers. Yes, there were some sneakers for sale. In the 4 days, they made something like $50,000 just in the 4 days in selling. They actually increased their Instagram followership by 40,000 in 4 days. Okay, they had 1.7 million live stream views. They live streamed every one of those experiences. Overall, all the tweets, all the Instagram, all the followership, all the sharing created 221 million media impressions.
That's quite a result.
If a Facebook click costs 8 cents and lasts a millisecond, how much is what the average dwell time in this space was 40 minutes. The average dwell time of someone going into this space for 4 days, during those 4 days, was 40 minutes. If a Facebook click is worth 8 cents and it lasts a millisecond, how much is 40 minutes worth to that brand? And was the rent based on that? No. Converse paid for the space. And the space actually wasn't in a high street, it was in a pretty tertiary space, just this wonderful old building. So I reckon they wouldn't have paid too much for that. So my argument is that if it's a recruitment, and this typology was about recruiting customers, it wasn't primarily about selling sneakers. If that is the case, what is 40 minutes of dwell time, of attention, of sharing, of advocacy, of fandom, what's that worth to a brand? And how do we, as a landlord, realise the value of our space? Now, this building was in a tertiary space in East London. Imagine it being in a hub airport with millions of customers, sure. A1 consumers going through that. What's that worth to a brand? That's why I say airports have got the potential to be the most powerful media platform for a brand. And airports have got to absolutely realise the value, the power they have if they stop thinking about concrete boxes with glass fronts with a light box above. We can create stage sets. And those stage sets also have another benefit. As designers, we design terminals. If you think about these stage sets as open cell, programmable, reconfigurable sets that can be changed, the design of that is a very different animal to designing a shop. The master planning of it is very different. How you master plan these kind of three typologies with these non-retail elements, and how that connects to the public realm, how it begins to connect with the process and the holding journey, which are the key things in an airport, is a different challenge. It's a very different exercise.
It's a brave new world.
Brave new world. So it impacts the physical space, it impacts its design, it impacts its service proposition, it impacts the technology, it impacts the data you have to capture, it impacts the master plan, and most importantly, it impacts the CapEx and the OpEx. Because the CapEx is not just designing these shops that are going to last 12, 15, 20 years.
Well, they're through two regenerations anyway.
This serendipity machine that I keep on referring to is constant change, constant newness, constant excitement, which is what airports are lacking, which is why engagement or conversion has halved in the last 10 years. So we've got to break out the shackles of this pandemic of mediocrity. And I think that is really at the core of it. It's easy to say. It's very difficult to begin to apply it, but I don't think there's a choice. The do nothing strategy is not an option. We've got to do and learn, not wait and see. You know, we can't just wait. Consumers are changing at rapid speed. We've got to test ideas, fail successfully. Because if you want to be 100% sure, you're going to be 100% late with the speed at which consumers change. And I think this is sort of really at the core of it. So the remaining 40%, let's just say is 40%, I can't be sure about that. The non-retail piece, after we've spoken about the three typologies, what can that be? I mentioned earlier on co-working. So let's run a scenario here. We're seeing a massive shift in the way people work. Increasingly working from home, hybrid working in the office. So I have a flight at 6 p.m. and that day I'm working from home. Do I work from home and leave at 4 and get to the airport? Or is there in the airport an amazing co-working facility? I don't mean a lounge, I don't mean somewhere on the 3rd floor where I have to have a card to get in. I mean, in the ideal, a co-working facility that I can go to at 9 o'clock. Do my work there, bearing in mind that what we're seeing now is the fragmentation of work and work being stitched into our daily life, our daily habits. It's a response to a culture which is about a dip in, dip out culture of work. We're dipping in and dipping out of work whilst we're conducting our day-to-day life, whether that life is shopping or travelling. And therefore there's a blurring between business travel and leisure. We're on leisure travel, but we're working as well, and vice versa. So should I go to this airport and have an amazing co-working facility? I sit there, I do some emails, I pop out for a Peloton class for half an hour, I come back, I do a report, I go out and have some lunch, a bit of shopping, have a massage, whatever I do. Can we treat this airport, IDL, as a town square that I spend my day at? Because I don't want to work from home, this is a much better facility and environment. And I think there's an opportunity to explore
It becomes
that.
your space.
It becomes your space. It becomes a sense of belonging, particularly if you're a frequent traveller. But I mean, the big question is, and I get asked this question all the time. I have never operated an airport. I'm not that's not my profession. I've not worked in airports. I've worked with airports, partnered with airports for 30 years. So I'm no expert on the operations of this. I want to get into a debate, a conversation with airports, as my colleagues do, about how can we deliver this. There's the principles. What is the revenue model? Is it a subscription model? The key for us, and we're doing this in shopping centres, we're creating co-working facilities that are completely aligned and stitched into retail. For us, co-working is retail.
And are they working?
Working incredibly well. Co-working is retail for us. It's no different. Co-working is not about offices. It's absolutely got to be aligned and stitched into retail, F&B, leisure, culture, hospitality. It's part of that. It animates public realm. And if we take that argument one step further, there are two trends that I believe are driving the future of public realm. One is the fragmentation of work, as I've just explained. So we work anywhere within our daily life. It's stitched into the daily rhythm of life. The second trend is quick commerce, how we as consumers are increasingly expecting to be able to order virtually anything from an app, geolocated, to be delivered to us, whether it's food, whether it's a product, whether it's a bottle of whiskey, whether it's a perfume bottle. Now, doing that in a contained space like an airport is obviously very easy. So if we can dwell, let's not just say sit, if we can dwell in a public space, whether that public space is in a lounge, airport IDL, or in a shopping centre or in the street, and we can order food, so we can eat, we can drink, we can work, we can shop without moving, how does that affect public realm? How does it affect seating? Is it still rows and rows of black leather seats? We should be able to walk into an IDL, look at a whole range of dwell zones, let's call them, not even call them seating, and that they should ask us a question. What is it I want to do today? Am I working? Am I eating? Am I a family? Am I a lone traveller? Am I a business? Do I want to be social? Do I want to be entertained? These dwell zones should respond to different missions I have. And the days of rows and rows of black seats, I hope, are over. Yes, there's an argument, and again, this is where it'd be great to have conversations with airports. You need a capacity, you need to be able to seat a number of people. We get that, we know there's the numbers.
But it's the way it's done.
It's the way it's done, and I think it's the intent. Yes, we've got to deliver numbers, but let's not ignore the opportunities that you can create really compelling experiences through these dwell zones where people can work. So there's a whole bunch of different ideas here which we are really eager to share and to be wrong, to be proved wrong. I mean, I'd love to have that debate because we don't see ourselves as suppliers, as vendors. We're strategic partners for airports. And we have a particular specialism, a particular outlook, which I think we can add value and also learn, because we've never operated an airport.
Let's just develop this a little bit and move on to tech. Just how important a role do you think tech should play now? There's AI, VR, AR, robots in shop, smile to pay, automated retail. I mean, it's all there to be harnessed, isn't it? And is, in your view, the retail world now effectively a fresh and new playground for the virtual world?
Yes, it is a playground, and we refer to this as hyperphysical, where consumers are increasingly immersed in the digital world. We're seeing increasingly websites becoming more and more immersive and less sort of functional, and therefore the virtual world is becoming engaging and interesting and exciting. What we've got to do is replicate that in the physical world. That's why we refer to this as hyperphysical. How we create, I'm not going to call them stores, how we create these physical spaces that are event-driven, that are as immersive, as compelling as a virtual experience, and how do we overlay the virtual How do we, I sometimes use the word magnify. How do we magnify the experience through digital, through AR, through VR? How do we get deeper? It's not about physical or digital. It's not about online or offline. In future, consumers will not be even referring to online and offline. It'll be like talking about fax machines. You know, it's one thing. It's just called, it's just inline. You're going to flip from online to offline in milliseconds, and we're doing that now at the moment. I'll give you a great example. Decentraland is a platform in the metaverse. It's one platform, and Gucci have a store, or a series of stores in Decentraland, and you know, in the first weeks of opening the store, they had 1.8 million engagements in that store in Decentraland, virtual engagements. But what's interesting, and so do Heineken and other brands, which is fine. You kind of expect that. But what's really interesting is that Domino's Pizza opened a Domino's in Decentraland, and people were in the virtual world doing what they're doing, playing around, walking into with their avatar into Domino's and ordering a pizza and getting it delivered physically. So they're using the virtual world, Decentraland, like a website.
It's just being leveraged.
Yeah, it's a website that's in your environment. Now that is interesting, and that is what I mean about we don't distinguish between physical and digital and virtual. We work together on that. We will work together on that as an experience. And I think so. To answer your question, yes, digital must work with the natural human behaviour. As soon as it works against the way we naturally behave, Google Glass being a great example, it fails. Clients are always talking about digital transformation, and often what they mean is put more screens in the shop. You know, this is not what it's about. We've got to use the technology in a much more meaningful way, in a more compelling way, and unless it enhances the experience and makes it simpler and seamless, it won't work. But one of the big shifts I think we're going to see very soon is this universal idea of image recognition. As the data banks grow and grow, where your mobile device will be able to recognize anything. So if I'm walking through an airport and someone has a rucksack behind them, and I'm walking behind them, and I can take my mobile device out, recognize that rucksack and buy it there and then through image recognition platform, what's the role of the shop? So
you think, though, that going back to airports, that there's a bigger opportunity by creating more pop-up spaces as a first step in your ladder than just staying with the traditional execution of pop-up stores? Is that could that be a platform for a bigger opportunity for us? You know, a slow conversion to the new environment that you're talking about.
You've provoked me now to talk about pop-ups, which is one of my bee in my bonnets about the retail industry generally, including airports. And that is, I think the word pop-up has been abused by the retail industry and in some instances airports, whereby it's used to fill vacant space or spaces that are sort of not right for a shop in many ways.
Sometimes it uses the white space in airports.
It does. I mean, I think airports actually do it better than a lot of shopping centres, to be truthful. But the idea of pop-up is a response to a big shift in culture, of consumer culture. You know, consumers are engaging with brands across all platforms, particularly social, and consumers, particularly when it comes to social first brands, the first interaction they have with a brand is social. The brand has been developed from a social platform. They develop their community first, and then they develop into product. And the final one of the results of that is they create a physical space. Their transactional fulfillment model is online, through social and online. The physical space is about community, and that pop-up, the physical space, doesn't work unless it's driven by social. It's not just another type of shop. It's driven to work. It's got to be driven through social. It's got to be a community. And I think that is the essence for me of pop-up. Because for it to work, it has to be ephemeral and surprising and constantly new. And I think that's really kind of the essence of pop-up.